There are smiles that light up rooms. And then there are smiles that have been practiced so long, so carefully, in so many mirrors, that they have become armor. She has worn hers for nearly 2 decades, through cathedrals and cameras, through grief dressed up as protocol, through pain that never quite made it into the official photographs. The world sees a princess stepping from a car in a pale blue coat, lifting her hand in that familiar, elegant wave, her expression warm and open and utterly composed. But what do you actually know about the woman behind that composure? What storms were weathered to build that kind of stillness? And why, in the 44th year of her life, does the smile sometimes flicker, just for a fraction of a second, in a way that makes you wonder what exactly it costs her to hold it in place? This is not the story the palace prepared. This is the story underneath it. She was born Catherine Elizabeth Middleton on January 9, 1982, in Royal Berkshire Hospital in Reading, England. The world was not watching. There were no photographers at the door, no telegrams from heads of state, no flowers sent from foreign governments. She was simply a baby girl, the first child of Michael and Carol Middleton, born into a family that was comfortable and loving and entirely, blissfully ordinary. Her father was a flight dispatcher for British Airways. Her mother had been a flight attendant before she left to raise her children. They lived in the village of Bradfield, Southend in Berkshire, and the house was filled with the warm noise of family, dogs underfoot, the smell of baking, evenings around a table that didn't require formal seating arrangements. What people often miss about Kate Middleton, what gets buried beneath the mythology of the princess, is that her earliest years were genuinely joyful in that uncomplicated, countryside English way. She was a child who loved the outdoors, who ran through fields with muddy boots and came home with color in her cheeks. She had a younger sister, Pippa, born 18 months after her, and later a brother, James. The three of them grew up close, the way children do when their parents are present and intentional about family. Michael and Carol Middleton were not absent parents chasing ambition. They were there. Dinner every night. Holidays together. A security that many children never receive, and that Kate would later draw on in ways she perhaps didn't even realize. When Kate was 2 years old, the family relocated. Michael had accepted a position with British Airways that required a move to Amman, Jordan. For 2 years, the young Catherine Middleton lived in the Middle East, surrounded by warm stone and ancient light, by a landscape that felt both vast and intimate. She attended an English-language nursery school there, learning, as all children in foreign places do, how to adapt, how to make a new room feel like home, how to smile at strangers until they stop being strange. It is a skill she would need for the rest of her life, though she could not have known that standing in the dusty courtyard of a Jordanian school at the age of 3. The family returned to England in 1986, settling in the village of Chapel Row in Berkshire. It was here, in the green and quiet of the English countryside, that Kate's childhood solidified into something she would always return to emotionally. There is a particular quality of English village light in autumn, golden and slant and fleeting, and Kate grew up bathed in it. She attended St. Andrew's School in Pangbourne, where she excelled at sport. Hockey, swimming, tennis. She was the girl who ran fastest and threw furthest and laughed loudest on the pitch. Not academic in the narrow, bookish sense, but sharp and capable and socially fluent in ways that matter just as much. But beneath the competence, beneath the golden girl's surface, something was already beginning to form. A watchfulness, a careful awareness of how she appeared to others, whether it was born in Jordan, or in the social dynamics of a fee-paying English school, or simply in the bone-deep temperament she arrived with. It was there. She was learning to manage impressions, to be likable, to cause no offense. It would serve her magnificently in the years to come, and it would cost her something, too. Kate was bullied. Not the cinematic kind of bullying that announces itself in dramatic confrontation, the quieter, more insidious kind. The kind that works through exclusion. through whispered conversations that stop when you enter a room, through the cold mathematics of a lunch table where there is somehow never a spare seat. She was 13 and she was lonely, and the school that was supposed to be a new beginning became, instead, a place she dreaded. The girl who had been so buoyant on the hockey pitch at St. Andrews found herself shrinking, quieting, pulling inward. Her parents removed her after less than a year. She transferred to Marlborough College in September 1996, and it was there, over the following years, that something began to re-emerge. Not the unguarded girl she had been before. That version was gone, softened now into something more careful, more considered. But a new version, stronger in some places, yes, and in other places, perhaps, more defended, more careful about who she let close, more practiced at projecting a warmth that kept people at a comfortable, manageable distance. The smile she would later be photographed wearing in 1,000 official photographs. It was born here, in the corridors of Marlborough, rebuilt from something that had been briefly, quietly broken. The lowest point of Kate Middleton's life is not the one that made international headlines. It is not a scandal, not a public humiliation witnessed by millions. It is something quieter and, in its quietness, more devastating. It belongs to the period between 2007 and 2008, when the relationship between Kate and William, a relationship she had given almost a decade of her young life to, fell apart. She was 25 years old when Prince William ended things. April 2007. The details that leaked to the press were sparse and painfully ordinary for something so consequential. He needed space, they said. He was young, they said. He wasn't ready. And Kate, who had built her life around a future that now evaporated in a single conversation, had to absorb the loss while the whole country watched. There is a particular cruelty in being a private person attached to a public man. Your grief has an audience. Your swollen eyes are photographed outside Mahiki nightclub and described in tabloid language that reduces devastation to column inches. She was 25 and she had to decide, in real time and in public, who she was going to be in the aftermath of something that would have broken many people entirely. She did not perform her sadness. She did not grant interviews or let carefully leaked sources describe her pain for sympathetic coverage. She went out. She wore her hair down and her dresses bright. She smiled. That smile, that carefully constructed, deeply felt, beautifully maintained smile. It appeared in the photographs from those months like a small and extraordinary act of defiance. Look at me. I am not destroyed. Whatever you think is happening behind these eyes, whatever is actually happening, I am not going to let you see it break me. But she was hurting. Of course she was hurting. She had given years to a relationship and watched it dissolve without warning. She had spent her entire 20s being defined by her association with a prince, had watched doors open not because of who she was, but because of who she was with. And now those doors were no longer hers to walk through. The question of who Kate Middleton actually was, separate from William, separate from the royal gravity that had organized her life since she was 21, must have felt terrifying in those months, like standing on solid ground and realizing the ground was something else entirely. She moved into a flat in Chelsea with her sister Pippa. She returned to work at her family's party supply company, Party Pieces. She went to the gym. She ate well. She slept. She kept herself moving because movement is sometimes the only thing that stands between a person and the kind of stillness that swallows you whole. And she waited, not passively, not hopefully in any clinging, desperate way. She simply continued to be herself, and she trusted, or taught herself to trust, that whatever came next would be enough. The question was whether anything would come next at all. There are moments in a life when the entire narrative balances on a single decision, a single phone call, a single summer. This was Kate's, and she chose to do something remarkable. She chose to stop waiting for rescue and to become, instead, fully, unapologetically herself. She signed up for a dragon boat race charity event. She threw herself into friendships she had let wither during the years of intensive royal adjacency. She laughed, really laughed, the kind that reaches the eyes, in the photographs from that summer. And somewhere in the watching, something shifted for William. He called. They met. They talked. And slowly, tentatively, the relationship that had broken began to rebuild on different foundations. Not the foundations of a young man who wasn't ready and a young woman who was trying to be whatever he needed. Something more mutual. Something that had been tested and had survived the testing. By autumn of 2007, they were together again, and this time, the timeline felt different. More intentional, like two people who had learned, through loss, what they actually valued. The engagement came on November 16, 2010, in Kenya, at a place called Lewa Wildlife Conservancy, a stretch of open savanna where the sky at dusk turns amber and gold and the world feels ancient and enormous. William had carried his mother's sapphire and diamond ring in his rucksack for 3 weeks before he found the right moment. It was, by all accounts, private and quiet and completely unlike the staged grandeur the world would later project onto it. Just two people, alone in a landscape too big and too beautiful for pretense, saying something true to each other. The world heard about it 3 weeks later. And then everything, absolutely everything, changed. The wedding on April 29, 2011 was watched by an estimated 2 billion people worldwide. 2 billion. A number so large it becomes almost meaningless, so instead think of it this way. When Kate Middleton emerged from the groom of the stool's car outside Westminster Abbey, wearing her Alexander McQueen gown, with its delicate lace bodice and cathedral-length train, somewhere in the world it was early morning and somewhere it was night, and in almost every time zone, someone was watching. The globe stopped and looked at this woman who had once cried in a Chelsea flat wondering if she would ever be loved the way she deserved to be loved. She walked down the aisle, and she smiled. That smile, the one that had been rebuilt in the corridors of Marlborough College, that had survived tabloid coverage and public heartbreak, and the specific loneliness of loving someone who belongs partly to the world. It was there, that smile, more radiant than it had ever been photographed. And it was real. Whatever else could be said, whatever difficulties lay ahead, whatever the cost of the crown would eventually reveal itself to be, in that moment, it was real. The years that followed brought the children. George, born July 22, 2013, a summer baby, a boy who looked from his first photographs like a person of enormous gravity. Charlotte, born May 2, 2015, bright-eyed and fierce almost from infancy. Louis, born April 23, 2018, round-cheeked and wild. Kate took to motherhood with the same combination of warmth and competence she had brought to everything. But there were glimpses in the early years. The morning sickness so severe it required hospitalization. The hyperemesis gravidarum that left her hollowed out and pale through 3 pregnancies. Of just how much the body, and the life, and the role could cost. The fall, when it came, arrived not in a single catastrophic moment, but in the accumulation of smaller fractures. The departure of Harry and Meghan from royal life in January 2020 sent shockwaves through the family that have never fully subsided. The rift that opened up in those months, between brothers, between sisters-in-law, between a family and its own mythology, was not just a tabloid story. It was a real human fracture, played out in real time, with real people. And Kate, as ever, was somewhere in the middle of it, holding things together with both hands while cameras captured only the surface. Then in January 2024, Kate disappeared. There was a scheduled abdominal surgery at the London clinic, announced with minimum detail and maximum composure. She would be away from public duties for some weeks, they said. The palace was calm. The language was clinical and precise. And then she didn't come back. Weeks passed. Easter approached. There was a photograph, a family photograph, taken at Windsor, the children arranged around their mother, that turned out to have been digitally altered. The press identified the manipulation. The palace admitted it. Kate admitted it herself, with an apology that was so human and so unguarded that it startled people who had come to think of her as untouchable. And then, in a green field that looked like every English countryside she had ever loved, she sat in front of a camera and she told the world. Cancer. A diagnosis discovered during surgery, the type and stage deliberately kept private. She was receiving chemotherapy. She was frightened, and she was asking, quietly and without drama, for time and space to heal. The world fell silent for a moment. Not the silence of shock, exactly, although there was shock. The silence of recognition. The recognition of what it means to carry something this large and this private in a life lived this publicly. To smile through every photograph, not knowing what the scans would say. To show up for your children in the morning when your body is fighting something you cannot control. To maintain the composure, the warmth, the careful and committed dignity, not because it is expected, but because it is, after everything, simply who you are. The sapphire ring appeared in every photograph throughout her treatment. Diana's ring. The ring that had been carried across the Kenyan savannah in a rucksack for 3 weeks before it found its finger. It became, in those months, something more than jewelry. A talisman. A thread connecting her to a woman who had also navigated impossible terrain inside an impossible institution, who had also smiled through pain that the cameras couldn't fully see, who had also been reduced and then reclaimed her own dimensionality. Watching Kate wear that ring through her chemotherapy, through her gradual reappearance at public events, there was something in it that resisted easy sentiment and arrived instead at something raw. Something about inheritance, about what we choose to carry forward from the people we loved and lost. She returned to public life slowly and with evident intention. Trooping the color in June 2024. Wimbledon in July. The U.S. Open. Each appearance calibrated, each chosen for meaning. And that smile, there again, always there, but something different in it now. Something more deliberate and less defended. As if the cancer had stripped something away that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. As if surviving the worst had given her permission to be, finally, simply herself. Her philosophy has never been articulated in manifestos or speeches of grand ambition. It lives instead in the causes she has chosen. Early childhood mental health through the Royal Foundation Center for Early Childhood. Work that she has pursued with genuine academic engagement, reading research papers and hosting roundtables and speaking with the quiet authority of someone who actually knows what she's talking about. She understands, in a way that is both personal and intellectual, that what happens to a child in their first 5 years shapes everything that follows. She knows it from the literature, and she knows it, you suspect, from herself. From the girl in Jordan learning to adapt. From the 13-year-old who came home from down house school and sat across from her parents and said something is wrong. She is 44 years old as she stands at this particular crossroads. Her hair is slightly shorter than it was. There are lines around her eyes that weren't there before, and they suit her in the way that lived experience suits a face that has decided to stop being merely beautiful and to become, instead, interesting. She is a mother of 3 children who are watching her, with the terrifying perceptiveness of children, learn how to come back from something that tried to keep her down. She is a wife to a man who has his own wounds, his own inheritance, his own grief to manage. She is a daughter-in-law to an institution that does not easily make room for vulnerability. And she is, underneath all of it, still the girl from Berkshire who loved muddy boots and autumn light, and the particular freedom of running so fast that the world blurs at the edges. Now I want to speak to you. Yes, you. The one watching this. The one who clicked on this video for reasons you might not fully be able to name. Maybe you saw something in the title. Maybe you recognized something. The painful reality behind a smile. You've seen that before, haven't you? Maybe you've worn it. There is a kind of courage that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't stand up in front of crowds and declare its presence. It shows up instead in the small, repeated choices: to get dressed when you don't want to smile at the school gates when your body is exhausted and your heart is heavy, to keep going when going feels like the least natural thing in the world. Kate Middleton has been showing that kind of courage for 44 years. Most of those years were invisible. The cameras caught the gown and the wave and the smile, but they missed the cost. They missed the downhouse dormitory. They missed the Chelsea flat. They missed the private terror of a diagnosis delivered in a hospital bed far from anything that felt like solid ground. And here is what I want you to take from this. Not a lesson, not a motivational framework, but something more honest than that. The people who appear to have everything together are often the ones carrying the most. The smile that never seems to waver is often the one that has been most carefully maintained through the most difficult rehearsal. This doesn't make it false. It makes it extraordinary. The maintenance of warmth and grace under conditions that would justify their complete absence. That is not performance. That is character. There is a sapphire ring. You know it now, blue as a winter sky, diamond circled, worn on a finger that has held children's hands and a husband's hand, and the hands of strangers at hospital wards and charity visits. That ring is a story of inheritance and loss and love rebuilt from the ground up. It is the symbol of something carried forward from grief into something that might, tentatively, be called hope. The question I leave you with is not about Kate Middleton. It's about you. What are you carrying that no one can see? What smile have you maintained past the point of ease, past the point of comfort, into something closer to necessity? And what would happen, really, actually happen, if you let someone in close enough to see the cost of it? She is still figuring it out. At 44, with cancer in her rear view and a future still being written, she is still deciding how much of herself to give away and how much to protect. Maybe that's the most human thing about her. Not the tiara, not the ring, not the composure. The fact that she's still working it out, just like you.